Hi, I'm Mark Olsen with the Los Angeles Times, and we're here today to talk about the new film Get Duked, a camping trip comedy set in the Scottish Highlands. And for more news about film and events like this one, as well as the most important news from Los Angeles and around the world, you can subscribe to the Los Angeles Times at latimes.com/subscribe. And you can sign up for my regular Indie Focus Movies newsletter at latimes.com/newsletters. And now we're here today with the writer and director of Get Duked, Ninian Doff. Ninian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real thrill.
And now, where in the world are you? Where am I reaching you?
I'm currently in Brighton, which is down by the coast of England. It's about an hour outside London. Yeah, in the rain.
And now the film is set in Scotland, where you grew up. And now, it for American audiences, could you just explain a little bit of what the Duke of Edinburgh Award is? Because the movie is kind of based around this contest. And I know when I first saw the movie, I thought it was made up. I didn't realize it's like an actual thing.
Yeah, no, it's true. So the Duke of Edinburgh Award is a real thing that actually a good number, like about 200,000 kids a year, I think, go on it through their schools. And it's a bit like something like Scouts. It's like it's based on a lot of there's sort of community service elements and this and that, but the heart of it that everyone knows it for is that you do this camping, hiking element where essentially at teenage level, normally in groups of sort of 4 to 6, you get sent out into the wilderness. In the case of me in Scotland, the Scottish Highlands with my friends, and you're staying either overnight for 1 or 2 or even I think 4 nights ultimately. And a lot of teenagers do it. Most teenagers get completely lost, and it's certainly formative. So yeah, it's not important to know about it because, like you say, it works just as well if you think it's a wild creation of myself. But in reality, actually, many British and I think also Australian teenagers go on this kind of slightly bizarre rite of passage.
But now, is it something that you had always thought had a movie in it? Like how did you come across the idea of having the Duke of Edinburgh Award be the sort of the basis for a feature film?
Yeah, it's a funny one, and it's one of those things that you just, how do brains work and this and that. It wasn't in my head forever at all, and I was strangely thinking about scripts I wrote when I was a teenager. You know, I've always wanted to make films, and I sort of was writing, I think, to be honest, bad kind of Tarantino ripoffs when I was like 14 or something, and I had this idea suddenly where I thought of kids on the Duke of Edinburgh Award think they're being hunted by the Duke of Edinburgh. And it made me laugh. And I kind of was like, oh, I wish I'd written that script as a teenager and shot it with my friends, because that would have been an amazing film. And then like about 5 seconds later, I was like, so why is that not a film you can make now? Why is it that you wish you'd made it back then? And that started making me think about teenage voices and Scottish voices, and then certainly being a teenager now. And immediately that idea of, okay, they're being hunted by the Duke. And that within a few seconds was like, you know, this film was written in the kind of the wake of Brexit in the UK and Trump in America. And there was this sense of like, oh, I want to make a revenge film for the next generation. So immediately that was all like, you know, one of those mad things. I was riding my bike, and with about 5 seconds, I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Like, you know, fell off my bike and started scribbling ideas down.
Is that where you get a lot of your best ideas, is riding your bike?
A bizarrely high percentage. Yeah, I think it forces your brain to like filter out just enough because you're concentrating on something that you can kind of start getting crazy thoughts.
And now you have a very successful career as a director of music videos and commercials. This is your first feature film. Is that something you kind of had always felt you've been building towards? I'm interested in kind of like you know, going from the career you've had to making your first feature film.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I've absolutely always been obsessed with filmmaking and making films and making short film stuff. And I was working as an editor and in motion graphics whilst making kind of more short film things, just when kind of music videos kind of died briefly. And then with the kind of, you know, internet, they started bubbling back up to life again. And I was feeling a bit disillusioned with short films. Then I went to a night where they were showing music videos, and it was just electrifying, seeing like the storytelling and the creativity and the freedom that obviously filmmakers were getting in the form of music videos. So then I almost stopped everything. You know, I didn't write. I was just, everything was about becoming a short music video director because I saw it was an opportunity that you could be really prolific, really you could mess with tons of genres. I always sort of joke, essentially, I made loads of short films in the form of music videos. I rarely have the band in them, and I got known for that, so I didn't even get asked to. So I was making science fiction movies, musicals, nature films, anything, and that really kind of built up my, I guess, my voice and found myself in that, and they're so important to me for that reason. So I always wanted to make a feature film, many feature films, and I was working on it. And yeah, as I was writing this and getting into it, rather than sort of trying to dismiss my past and be like, okay, now I'm an important filmmaker, instead I kind of really, I almost wrote like a little love letter to music videos themselves in my feature film. So it absolutely acknowledges my music video past, as people who know will watch it. And I also had the joy of being able to rip myself off finally, which was great, because every now and then I'd see commercials steal ideas from my music videos or techniques. But now I was like, oh, cool, I can just go through my whole back catalogue and steal all my own ideas again. So that was nice.
Is that true? Is there stuff in the movie that in some ways, like maybe the music videos were like a laboratory experiment of like how to do something? There is stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I sort of like, I even somewhat subconsciously, I think, can see even things I'm working on now. I can see music videos that I was almost doing a little test on. In this video here, yeah, I see elements of a Chemical Brothers video I did, which is sort of a crazy chase sequence in a desert. I see elements of a Migos video I did, which was hallucinatory, sort of multiple repeated visuals. And then also even like a Mike Snow video I did, where you sort of were playing with like good guys and bad guys and subverting genre. So it was my lab. Music videos were kind of my testing ground.
Because I have to say, watching your music videos, you would pack so much story into like 3 or 4 minutes. Like they're very narrative intensive for music videos. What was it then like sort of making the leap to a 90-minute feature film? Did you feel like you really had like room to finally like spread out in telling a story?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think the one thing that I think is funny is I'm a big fan of, I'm a really big fan of like Buster Keaton actually, and I always sort of thought that music videos were sort of the natural extension of silent movies, because you're telling a story with no dialogue and purely visual, and how much farce and humor and drama you can get with no dialogue at all. And so it seemed funny to me that when I came to write my own film, it's packed with dialogue. It's like wall-to-wall dialogue. So obviously, without knowing it, I was desperate for people to speak. So that's a funny reaction to that. But then in terms of the jump from short form to long form, a lot of people asked me about that. And I was very aware of it. I had a moment driving to set on day one when I suddenly realized I'd never made anything longer than about 4 minutes. And now I was going to make a 90-minute film. But the directing, the shoot, the instinct, everything, music, I was all ready for it. It was a joy. Every day was a joy. And I think actually the hard learning curve, in an amazing way, but definitely in the most hardest way, was actually in the edit, the pacing, how, you know what I mean? Like, you understanding, like, the first 20 minutes of a film and how you're guiding that and what your energy is, when you're used to, like you say, sort of, you're used to doing 3-act structure in 4.5 minutes, and now you try to do it to 90. And so pace, humor in an edit is actually where I think the massive learning curve was. On set, the shooting, everything else, I think was completely natural next step for it. It was easy. It was a joy.
But then I've seen you say in another interview where you sort of wanted the movie to kind of keep mixing up its references, where like people think it's one kind of movie, and then after 20 minutes or something, you're going to like shift. And so it's going to seem like Stand By Me, then it's suddenly going to seem like it's The Wicker Man, and it's going to seem like it's something else. And can you talk a little bit about that, like as far as like the pacing, like you're talking about, but also just like having this really sort of like freedom in the style of the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I sort of, it's coherent. It's not like TV channel hopping, but yeah, kind of joke that every 20 minutes it changes genre in a way that is fun. And I sort of, as I remember, I was showing early cuts to people and wrapping my head around exactly like we're talking about, this pace and this balance, and enjoying people say that, like, they were like, okay, once this event happened or once this thing happened, I stopped trying to guess what this film was about. I was like, okay, this film is going to keep, taking a left turn every time I'm turning to the right. And that was really fun. I get to go in. And it was sort of, it probably got more in the edit, but it was there in script form. I remember when I was writing it, realizing that I had, 5 narrative threads running at once, and I wanted to bring them all together, and sort of just giggling to myself when I was like, I'm going to bring them together in a hip hop video. Like, why not? Why not? Like I've had, like you say, stuff with me. I've gone into like a sort of classic chase sequence. I've gone to this. I was like, now we're going to go to this. It's natural for the energy of this film. And people do seem to respond to the sort of the tone and the energy of it. And I think it's that we have such fun just sort of shifting gears. And we were talking about the sort of the initial ideas of the film as well earlier, and one of the very initial ideas was to sort of be in the world of horror, but flip it so that by the end the bad guys were stuck inside the house, while the teenagers, instead of running away for their lives, were like hammering on the doors and the windows, basically a reverse home invasion, and have the bad guys say, what's wrong with the youth of today? Why can't we just kill them? So it was always leading to that too. I always knew it was leading to a full 180 on the classic trope of a horror film, which probably gave me permission to just be as playful as I wanted.
And you mentioned earlier that you wanted this to be a movie that sort of, celebrated the voice of young people, and like where the youth of the movie really came from, like their energy. Can you talk a bit about the way in which the movie, it does set up this kind of, there's a sort of a young Britain and a sort of older, more traditional Britain that are like in opposition to each other. I mean, your use of tweed in this movie is just devastating. And so, like, what can you talk a bit about that idea, like the way that you wanted to put these generations
Sure.
in opposition to each other?
Yeah. I mean, that was really the absolute heart and the emotional drive for me in writing this and directing this, and the passion almost that pushed me every single day was really coming from this place of, I can't speak for other countries, and I'm sure people in Britain will correct me for this as well and tell me how wrong I am, and I'm probably going to offend some people. But for me personally, it felt like films were either very gritty and slightly miserable if they were talking about serious political theme, or very trivial and silly and gross out if they were funny. And they were never allowed to meet. And so I really wanted to write a sort of angry and political film within the context of utter humorous, let's even call it silly, wild, anarchic. You can watch the film drunk, you can watch it off your face, you can quote it. It's not, it doesn't take itself seriously. And then into that put in a kind of a political energy or awakening, and that was really important to me and something I was very excited about. And that felt also like a good way of, in any way, just engaging people a little bit, rather than it having to be like, okay, now sit down, we're going to all watch a really difficult, miserable bit of social realism.
But how did you? Was it hard to keep that balance, to like feel, what was going to be fun about the movie versus what was going to be serious about the movie? Because it's interesting that it does feel more real than it might from just its sort of setup.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's sort of. I was actually probably not hard to balance, because I knew that the way to pull that off was to, like put the humor like really high, high up, and not do that. So it's always looking for the laughs. It's always looking for this, whilst making, like I say, the simplest reduction of it is to call it a revenge film for the next generation. And it's really about that. It's not about class or about specifics. It's about sort of entitled establishment telling teenagers to not rock the boat and to just accept the way things are. And as we're brilliantly seeing every day currently across the world, the next generation being like, do you know what? Nah, not into it. We're going to change it. And it culminates in this speech from one of the characters, which was probably the hardest bit of thing to write in the whole film. The character Dean is sort of begins, feels the injustice, and he gives the most rambling and left field and not quite correct angry speech about it being unjust. And as I was writing it, I had to keep stopping it from sounding like an adult putting words in teenager's mouth, and make it more just, basically, he's got all the passion, but he doesn't have the facts yet. So he goes on a huge monologue about why it's unfair that they're going to live on communes in Mars while he's a mutant. But the sentiment and the anger is absolutely there already. And what's going to come later is maybe facts and theory.
And one thing I want to be sure to ask you about is that the villains in the story, the sort of older people who are hunting the kids, they're wearing these very weird masks that are like rubber masks that have like been torn in half or something. And just like
Yeah,
from a like a design standpoint, where did those come from? And are they like masks of something or someone specific?
yeah, no, it's great. I'm so glad you asked about that. One of the things I love to a fault in filmmaking and everything I do is getting way, way too into the minute details that no one ever sees. So even the like, what the logo is on someone's coat or this and that. And so with the with the masks, I wanted to go in this sort of villain way and I wanted to wear it, but we actually made a full clay model of the sort of the original Duke who kicked off this ritual of hunting the teenagers, and it's almost like his death mask was cast, and so everyone's actually wearing different iterations of it, and they've ripped and they've fallen apart, and it was fun to design how they wear. And working with Eddie Izzard, who's the sort of obviously the main Duke in this, he kind of together with me constructed what we called an inverse mask of Zorro. So he's basically got the eyes of someone else's eyes as his mask, which is a kind of really cool kind of slight cinematic nod and mad twist on the classic Phantom mask. But it's all the same face. We actually, when I talk about details no one else will ever know, we built an elderly man and we cast his face, and all the masks come from him, but no one's ever going to know that. But it was a joy to get into it.
And now you mentioned earlier how for you realized that you really wanted to like lean into your sort of music video work and not feel like you suddenly had to be like Mr. Big Time filmmaker. And I'm interested in how that sort of manifests itself. Like for you as you're making the movie, like what is it that you're sort of leaning into when you're thinking about those things and when you're trying to not hide from the
Right.
filmmaker that you already were?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think in the most literal and obvious sense, when you watch this, there's like I said, there's a music video at the heart of it. A narrative montage technique essentially takes the format of a music video and visually plays within those tropes. And like I said, get to use the techniques I've used in the past and the visual techniques. And I suppose that's the most obvious way, is the absolute cornerstone of this whole construction narratively is a music video. So when it came to the edit, I had no way of backing out of that. I'd absolutely put my stake in the ground when I was shooting it, that the heart of the film had to be a music video.
And now one of the characters, DJ Beetroot, who's like an aspiring rapper, and his raps are really something else. And was it fun for you to just write these raps that like they're not bad, but they're not good either?
Yeah, no, absolutely. DJ Beetroot is I mean, the film's about teenagers. We talked about a lot of what it's about on maybe the grander scale in terms of politically, but as a film about teenagers, it's also, of course, a film about friendship and also about identity. And I think all the characters are going through figuring out who the hell they are, or who the world thinks they are, and who they really are. And DJ Beetroot's definitely, let's say, probably living a bit of a lie and finding out what his true voice is. And we explore that journey in the only way you could with a teenage rapper, through his incredible freestyling. So initially, like you say, at the beginning of the film, we have what you could call maybe the worst rap in the world, or the greatest rap in the world. But it's I think I heard the amazing sentence phallocentric the other day, to basically talk about the fact that it's entirely about his genitals, with incredible homemade graphics on it. And that was fun to write, because it was like, what's the lyrics that someone would think were amazing but are also literally terrible. And I'm pleased to say Viraj Unasia, who plays DJ Beetroot, he happily collaborated with me on that rap. So he wrote a whole verse of it, and is very proud of being a co-author on the track is called, I believe, DJ Beetroot's Epic Dick Freestyle. And then when we get to the middle of the film, he sort of does find his voice and raps from the heart, and that had to be a lot more legitimate. And worked with an amazing Scottish producer called S-Type, who's actually done loads of very, very legit hip-hop production. And he took my sort of narrative scribbled lyrics and turned them into what is a legit track in its own right, called Get Duked, which is in the middle of it, which again then Viraj brought to life. So the challenge there was to try and make that one not too rubbish. I could almost hide behind the other one by letting it be rubbish.
And now that brings me. Can you talk a little bit about casting the movie? I mean, the four young boys in the film are all just so fantastic, but also so distinct from one another. Like, I think that's one of the things that I found so exciting, was how much of an individual identity each one of those four characters has.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm so proud and so fond of the four of them. The casting, as you can imagine, was a huge process because I'd sort of, after I'd written it and then came to realize how to make it, was the sort of horrifying realization that I put teenagers in about 98% of the movie. So there was nowhere to hide, and they're all together, and it's very ensemble. And so we cast with self tapes, and then workshops, and then auditions one-on-one, and then ultimately I had weekends where I was bringing different collaborations of four teenagers together and seeing how they work with this and juggling them around. And then, you know, at one point, you know, the character who plays Duncan, okay, that guy's stuck, and then we flipped it with this. Oh, that's this guy, this definitely is Ian. And finally we found our four, and it's that sort of amazing. I mean, the amazing thing about filmmaking that it's now feels like the universe really gave me these four actors. It's impossible to imagine anyone else playing them, and they of course brought them to life, and they brought that heart, and they're such incredible actors themselves. They've got, you know, different ranging of experience, but for some of them it was literally the first film they'd ever made, and others, you know, maybe they've, you know, done a small bit part, or they've done a little bit of TV, and they bring, I think, just that right amount of true passion and sort of energy and even roughness to it in a way that's hard to do later when you become very slick and wonderful. I think their natural instincts as actors really leap off, and it's been so wonderful. You know, this did a good festival run. It's been all around the world, seen it for about a year, went to a lot of festivals, and seeing every country get on board with them and fall in love with them and just get them is so magical. And you know, like I say, they're not known actors. This is their big breaking role for some of them, or a lot of them. And I'm counting the days till the whole world sees them and realizes what amazing talents they are.
But then the flip side of that, the adults in the movie, I mean, you have Eddie Izzard, Katie Dickey, Alice Lowe. I mean, like, you've got a really serious cast of actors for all the adult roles.
Yeah.
Was it hard to fill those?
And yeah, I mean, I still can't believe the cast that I got for the adult roles. There really isn't a bad note there. There isn't a weak casting. Everyone's so incredible, and like you say, so prestigious. You know, even right down to small roles like Dougie, the police officer back at the police station, is Brian Pettifer, who when you go on his IMDb and you see that man's career, you're like, wow, just that he'd even give us that tiny role. Everyone was so generous to me. And it was amazing. It just sort of, I think it was a little bit of a accumulation. The first actor who came on board in the adult roles was Kate Dickey, who I approached, and I really wanted her because I thought it set the tone so well. Because by casting her, you were saying, hey, look, this script is insane, and you know, moments that could be so, you know, silly or daft, but imagine Kate Dickey as the police officer, okay? It's not like, and then everyone was like, oh, wow, this amazing dramatic actress is playing this super straight in this ludicrous world and story. And that, I think, really helped bring everyone else on board. Bless her. Thank God that Kate came on board, because then I think everyone was like, okay, Kate's the police officer. Now I kind of get what this director's trying to do. And I think that kind of made other people come on board and build it all up. And the final piece of the puzzle, you know, Eddie Izzard was, for me, I'm such a huge fan of his, and to know that he was considering it and he kind of got the project, but I think he was in New York when I did my first phone call with him, so he was busy, and then I was always checking in every day with production, being like, did we hear anything? Could it be true? Could Eddie Izzard be the Duke? And then sure enough, that one Sunday on set, he's standing there wearing a crazy bespoke mask of Zorro, shouting at teenagers and firing a gun at them gleefully, and I was like, "My, look at that! Eddie Izzard's the Duke." It's just unbelievable.
And now to talk about kind of like the life of the movie. I mean, it premiered last year at the South by Southwest Film Festival, but then it went on to be the opening night at the Edinburgh Film Festival, which you took part in, like a teen filmmaking workshop when you were young.
Yeah.
That must have been an incredible feeling to then take your movie there.
Yeah, yes, indeed, yes. Good research. I know it's unreal. I mean, for all of us, was opened with the opening midnight movie at South by Southwest, and then won the Midnighters Award, and that was amazing because that really helped me understand that, you know, I'd written such a, in some way, specifically Scottish film, let's say, and then we opened in the coolest, you know, American festival, and the audience got it, won the award. So I was like, oh wow, okay, we're not too micro. The world is understanding it. And then opening film at the Edinburgh Film Festival is inconceivable. I'm from Edinburgh. I lived and breathed that festival. I used to be part of a film group called SCAM, Scottish Kids Are Making Movies, which was set up by Mark Olsen, the film critic, and also Shona Wood, who's not actually with us anymore. And the film's dedicated to her, because I was like, okay, this is a film about believing in teenagers' voices. And this woman who ran this young film group believed with such sincerity that we weren't just annoying teenagers, which we were, but we were sort of, you know, creative and worthwhile. And so she'd arranged for us to get press passes for the film festival and VHS cameras, and we'd meet all these directors and actors, and, you know, watch hundreds of films. And it definitely was my film school as a teenager growing up. So when I made the film, I was, you know, I kind of said to the producers, I was like, is there any way we could just play Edinburgh just for me? I just want to have my film in Edinburgh. They all sort of played it quite cool and all that. And then Brian, the producer, phoned me up, and he was like, Edinburgh, we'll show you a film. And I was like, okay, amazing. That's all my dreams come true. And then there's a long pause on the phone. He was like, and you're going to be the opening night film. And like, I can't even, you know, I can't in any way put into words how how emotional and insane that was. And then the opening night was in a cinema that, you know, it was a huge screen that's also the Opera House that I'd walk past on my way to school as a teenager. It was 1 minute away from where I'd skateboard every day, and it was in the heart of like my teenage life, this film, with suddenly, you know, a red carpet and everyone caring. And I mean, it was magic, unreal, really. The whole journey of this film's I don't know. Even now, you know, with like the support Amazon's giving it, it's properly coming out. I'm like, it's really, really something special. It seems to, you know, have connected with people. And what more can you want for your first film? It's just unreal.
But then, as a filmmaker, what is it like to be releasing a movie, especially your debut, your first feature, now? I mean, the way that you do press is different. The way it's getting released is feeling a little different. Like, what is it like to be going through all of this now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think, like I say, I'm lucky. I think in the current film landscape, maybe the festival circuit's not always necessarily that long. Often a film's bought after one festival, and then, you know, boom, it's gone. And we were very fortunate that we got to do that. So I experienced it in a sort of physical way with audiences in different countries around the world, and I got that pleasure. And then in terms of releasing a film now, I have to say, could I be any happier about releasing on a major streaming platform than, you know, necessarily a small theatrical one? Because no one's, you know, it's hard to go to the cinema now, and I'm feeling so heartbroken for people who, you know, were waiting for that moment. And this is a film, like I say, that I wanted people to just be able to put on and watch with all their friends and share. It's got that kind of energy to it. And so for me, it's landed perfectly in the exact right place for it, and I'm very delighted. And in terms of doing press and everything on the camera, I mean, I like it. I'm into it. I'm there. I can speak to everyone. My background gets a little funkier every time, like I say, because I think I started with a very boring, like everyone, you start lockdown with like nothing behind you. And then you kind of, every time you do a Zoom call, you get so bored of your own background. So you stick a hat up or dig something else out. If this goes on any longer, I'm just going to be like covered.
And then what has it been like for you sort of having made the film? I mean, I understand that you've made some videos and commercials since then. Like, do you feel differently when you're shooting now? Like, what is having made a feature film done for you?
Oh yeah. What a great question. Yeah, the film was, you know, wrapped a little while back when, like we say, we had a festivals and all that. And I've been, you know, working on written the next film, and then also going back to some short film stuff, doing some commercials, doing some music videos as well. And I think the biggest thing for me is like the self-torment and the relentless self-pressure and punishment I put on myself that I hadn't made a feature was brutal. I was very mean to myself. All I've ever wanted to do was make films since I joined that film group aged 12, I think. And so every single day that I wasn't making a feature film that I'd written was a day that I was kicking myself and bullying myself. So it was an amazing moment when the film wrapped, and I was like, oh my God, you're not all talk. You're not just the guy who's going, oh, one day. I was like, you made the film. Now let's hopefully, you know, now you've got to edit it and go through that, and hopefully the film's going to be good. But I think there's just an enormous emotional thing that so many filmmakers have, where it's it's borderline miraculous to make a film, any film. I think having made my own film, I find it very hard to be critical or mean about anyone else's film, because I'm just like, if you got to the point that you got on a shoot and you survived the shoot, like it's incredible to just pull that off. So every filmmaker is now my hero, and I'm like, but can't do that. And then yeah, I think as a director, uh, there is a confidence and a knowledge. The talk about like trial by fire, which is the shoot was 4 6-day weeks, so it was very fast, 24 days with just Sundays off in between. Of course, as the director, the Sunday is absolutely not off. You're just frantically prepping. So it was just relentless, and you come out. It's impossible to not go through that and grow and learn and find out the good things and the bad things about yourself and your directing.
And just the last thing I want to ask you, the movie originally premiered under the title Boys in the Wood, and then
Yeah.
it's been changed to Get Duked. And I understand that in part the title was changed out of respect for John Singleton, and I found that very touching. What was it that kind of made you want to change the title of the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really happy we changed it. It was something that was on my mind constantly, to be honest, in the last few months. And then when it sort of got brought up with everyone as we come to distribution, I leapt on it, and we had this working title, Get Duked, so it wasn't hard anyway. The origin of, we talked a lot about the origin of the film. I make it sound like, my God, there were so many different origins, but another big part of it was in that thing of not wanting to differentiate sort of some talking about a political or serious issue with being very funny and silly. I wanted to make a film set in the Highlands of Scotland that wasn't bagpipes or violins or Celtic music, which is such a given. That beautiful landscape has to be reflected with that music. And my experience as a teenager was, I grew up in Edinburgh, and anyone who's not been to Edinburgh, Harry Potter was literally based on Edinburgh. Okay, it looks like a Harry Potter set. It's medieval castles in the middle of the city. It's just staggeringly beautiful, but you don't know that when you're a teenager. You just think it's your rubbish hometown. You have to leave and realize it. And I was walking around with headphones on, listening to, East and West Coast rap whilst walking around medieval Scottish buildings, and going to the Highlands, going to my Duke of Edinburgh Award, listening to American hip hop. And I loved that concert. When I was writing it already, I was like, okay, I want to mix that. I think that feels really authentic to me and really original and true. So I wanted to play with American culture and glorious Scottish culture and smash them together. So that's very reflected in the soundtrack, which is the soundtrack's amazing. I say so myself because I didn't write the music. It's just artists I love who came on board. Vince Staples, Ron the Jewels, Danny Brown. So all of these sort of American artists in the Scottish Highlands, which is such a fun contrast. And the name Boys in the Wood reflected that energy, where I sort of want to play, a little tongue-in-cheek about genre and that sort of influence. But then, yes, to your point, since the film was shot, firstly, Singleton passed away, which obviously made you again think about his body of work. And then also, it's not as well as that, which is very respectful. Also, the whole Black Lives Matter movement is what I like so many people wanting to do better, wanting to self-educate, wanting to read, wanting to think about, just put the spotlight back on myself. And if this played festivals all around the world and everyone enjoyed it, and I never actually had anyone ever raise any issue with me, because I think when you watch the film, you enjoy it and you understand like I say, this American British culture. But I was just aware that, okay, maybe if we all try to do better, that's a cultural misstep, or I could just, why step that way? Why pun on something that's now a filmmaker who we've also lost? It's not quite right. It's a jokey title about something that now feels a bit more precious, and maybe, not my place to be so playful with. So like I say, it was all in my head. I was all thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, it made, everyone gets it, but that doesn't mean that I want to keep it. So when the discussion came up, like, hey, what about this? I was like, 100%, call it Get Duked. Like, let's go for this. And I think people may be surprised at how fast I moved on it, because it was a bit of a huge change last minute, but it really felt correct to me. It really felt right. And I think it was, the right thing. And yeah, credit to Singleton and his amazing body of work as well.
Well, Ninian, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today. It's really been a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck with everything releasing the movie.
Oh, thank you so much. Real pleasure as well. Thank you so much for giving it the attention and the support, and real pleasure talking to you as well.
And so for the Los Angeles Times, I'm Mark Olsen. Remember, you can subscribe at latimes.com/subscribe. Thanks again.
Thank you.